Hi there, my name is Becca Smith, and for this presentation I chose to present about speech codes theory, which came from Gary Phillipson in 2008 when he wrote Speech Codes Theory, Traces of Culture and Interpersonal Communication. So, interpretive theories and heuristic framework is kind of where speech code came from. Interpretive theories of local culture says that communication is understood as the creator of culture. And in order to understand a culture, you must analyze the communication within said culture. And it also says that the theory is derived from the analysis of the data versus the data then forming a theory. The heuristic framework basically just says that the results from the research can be applied across different cultures. So my discussion and focus with speech codes theory is that I'll specifically be talking about the application of speech codes theory in a local setting, which would be the culture of child development at Cabot Montessori School in Cabot, Arkansas. Therefore, I'll be focusing on the interpretive theories aspect of speech codes within a heuristic framework. So a little bit of background on Gary Phillipson. After reading an article by Del Himes called The Ethnography of Speaking, Phillipson decided to practice ethnography in the community where he worked, which he dubbed Teamsterville. Through ethnography, he was able to develop the term speech code, which he defines as an historically enacted, socially constructed system of terms, meaning premises, and rules pertaining to communicative conduct. The theory of speech codes, Phillipson says, seeks to define the existence of speech codes, what they consist of, how they can be found, and their influence on people within a specific culture. So there are a couple of key concepts that I wanted to define. The first is speech codes theory itself, which is that it analyzes the norms and the premises of talk within a particular culture. I also wanted to define ethnography because I use that word several times. So ethnography is the work of a naturalist who watches, listens, and records communicative conduct in its natural setting in order to understand a culture's complex web of meanings. So rhetoric is defined by the combination of their discovery of truth and the persuasive appeal, and performance ethnography versus just ethnography is not only present within the culture, is being not only present within the culture, but also being involved and taking part in said culture. So a huge component of speech codes theory are the propositions by Phillipson himself. So proposition 1 says that a distinctive culture indicates the presence of a speech code. Proposition 2 says that basically within that speech community there is the presence of multiple speech codes. Proposition 3 says that speech codes hold culturally distinctive psychology, sociology, and rhetoric. And Proposition 4 says that the significance of the speech has to do with the actual content of the speech, which means the speech codes used by the speaker as well as the meaning that is interpreted by the listeners. Proposition 5 says that within the speaking itself, within that community, the terms, rules, and the premises are embedded. Proposition 6 says that the specific use of speech codes helps to predict, to explain, and to control the conduct within communication. There are several research applications of speech codes theory. The first is that within interpretive research, Researchers are hired to observe behaviors within a culture to understand the meaning behind their actions. Within this, learning the norms and premises within a culture is vital. Inductive research starts with data and then patterns are studied to understand the behaviors. And it provides a deep understanding of subject study, and researchers immerse themselves within that studied culture. So when you apply speech codes theory, researchers search for those norms and premises of talk within cultures and present them as inductive theories within that culture. So with my use of speech codes, as I mentioned earlier, like Phillipson did in Teamsterville, I would use ethnography to determine the speech codes among the children within the setting of child development culture in Cabot Montessori School in Cabot, Arkansas. Also, like Phillipson, I would use speech codes to find the norms and premises within how these children talk. So past research to do with speech codes theory in a classroom has been using speech codes theory cross-cultural analysis to compare monolingual versus multilingual classroom speech codes. Another research group that I found had to deal with using speech code analysis in a university classroom, like this one that I've put down, which says language codes and classroom practice, from the Oxford Review of Education. So what these researchers and studies missed is that, you know, most of these researchers are using speech codes theories in communities within a culture. So like example, like a full city, West Little Rock, Arkansas. Most research that uses speech codes in educational settings, like I'm wanting to do, are actually more focused on college campuses instead of educational centers for younger children. So they actually don't focus on like child development as much as they just focus on the educational settings of a university, you know, course. And then most research also focuses on the speech code dynamic of multilingual classrooms, which is fine because the application can be, you know, it can be used everywhere. But how mine would be different is I would use that heuristic framework, which is, you know, finding the norms and the premises of a talk. And, you know, this could apply to child development for future research in home culture, like, you know, like as home life with the kids. Using this heuristic framework will help me focus my attention to see things that general research would not be able to see. I would use ethnography in order to immerse myself naturally in the classroom setting with those kids, as opposed to taking them out of the classroom to do research, like separating them. I would also use it to discover the general speech code of conversation in that classroom among the children. My age group also, versus these other past studies that have been done, my age group would be considerably younger than the majority of studies because it will have to be done with child development. So, you know, daycares and, you know, elementary schools, like preschools, that kind of thing would need to be studied. The application of my study would be very different because, like I said, the application of these other studies can be, you know, applied in a general like education system, but where I would like to apply mine is within the home life of a child. Here are a couple of my citations. I looked at the textbook as far as their definitions of speech codes, and I also looked at Phillipson's speech codes theory, Traces of Culture.